Welcome.
We are
Welcome.
good to go.
Okay. Welcome to this enriching event hosted by Local First Arizona. We're delighted to have you join us for an experience designed to enhance your business presence in podcasting. Today's Phyllis, today's facilitator is a distinguished figure in the greater Phoenix business community and a proud owner of Phoenix Business RadioX. With an extensive 30-year career covering a variety of sectors, she excels in guiding C-suite managers towards success. Her exceptional communications and leadership and strategic planning expertise makes her invaluable. It is my pleasure to introduce Karen Nowicki.
Oh, thank you, Anita, and welcome everybody. I'm glad that you're here. I think we had a full list of participants, which is always exciting, and I'm grateful to have the opportunity to be here with Local First today. It's been a while since we've been podcasting together, and I've been able to be a presenter and a speaker at the Arizona Good Business Summit a handful of times. So I see a lot of new faces, so I'm excited this is an opportunity for us to get to know each other. And I am one of those people that when I go to a lunch and learn or some sort of networking event, they've got a speaker, I don't want to be sold to. I just want to have information. I want to get to know the person. And so that's really how I prepared the presentation today, is really just so that you could leave this conversation knowing quite a bit more about podcasting and why I think it's beneficial for you. And whether you become a client of ours or you do it on your own or you choose somebody else, I just want you to leave this session feeling enriched and informed. And then I'm always available for conversations afterwards. So on that note, I'm going to share my screen and then we'll talk a little bit about how we're going to interact today. Let's make sure I've got the screen coming in. I think I did it. Okay, y'all can see, oh, kind of. Play from the start. There we go. All right, so you should be able to see and give me a thumbs up, Caitlin and Anita, if you can see my screen. Very good. And for those of you that might be new to Zoom or these kinds of conversations, if you can still see our photos and it's in the way of maybe my text, you can move it. Although, am I moving? Raise your hand. Give me a thumbs up again if you can see me moving the people on the screen. Or is that okay? So you can see it. All right. So then I'll try to move this. I'll put us down here in the corner. Bye. All right. Oh yeah, that looks great that way. All right. So podcasting starter kit for small business owners in 45 minutes. Well, good luck with that, right? I'm going to make sure that this content I share today is within 45 minutes. And Caitlin and Anita, Caitlin, I think you're moderating. If you can give me maybe a 5-minute warning if I'm not paying attention to the time and you notice that, I would love a 5-minute warning about 12:40, so that we have time for questions at the end. I think we're going to also try to create an opportunity for questions throughout the conversation too. So I'll give a few opportunities for that. And then at the end, we'll save some time for questions as well. All right, on that note, let's get started. I want to talk a little bit about our partnership with Local First Arizona. We have been a legacy partner for 3 years, and Thomas Barr has been doing the Arizona Good Business podcast with us for that amount of time. We've had 40 episodes and about 63 guests, and I don't handle the guests for any of the clients that we work with. So if you're interested in becoming a guest with Local First Arizona, then you can reach out to a team member and find out what that looks like for you. But today's conversation is more about you becoming a host and hosting your own podcast. We could have a whole nother conversation if Anita and Caitlin invite me back in. If we want to talk about the video component to podcasting, how to be a great host, how to be a great guest, all those things that are beyond kind of the 101 in podcasting. I put together the conversation after Anita and I had a couple of brainstorming sessions, and I thought it would be great to really talk about the power in podcasting and why it's so important. And so just following along with 9 different sections today, these are the areas we're going to focus on, not necessarily in that order, but I really want you to leave feeling like, I know enough about this to decide if this is something that I want to do for my business. So let's get started. We're going to talk about popularity first. I'm going to share some statistics with you. So I'm looking at my notes as I do. Let's talk about podcast growth. There has been a significant increase in growth in recent years. In 2022, there were over 3 million podcasts. Podcasting outnumbers audiobooks 6-1. And almost 30 million podcast episodes were published last year. So what does that mean for me as a podcaster and someone who helps people successfully create their own podcast so that they can have more success in business? Is that there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of things going on in the world of podcasting. And so you've got to make sure if you're going to spend time, both time and money, in creating your own podcast, you want to make sure that you are out there reaching the audience and having the conversations and sharing what you want to share in a meaningful way. Otherwise, I don't recommend doing it. Audience demographics, let's talk about that as well. Back in 2006, only 22% of US adult population were even aware of what podcasting is. By 2022, this figure rose to 79%, and now 82 million people are listening to podcasts. And there's an estimate of over 100 million coming up in 2024, which is absolutely fascinating. When it comes to advertising revenue, podcast advertising industry has steadily been growing. In 2022, podcast ad spend in the United States alone was 1.8 million. And this is expected to increase by 25% with no growth ceiling in sight. And the podcast ad revenue in US might reach $4 billion in 2025. So what does that mean for all of us that are small business owners? And that's, I'm assuming, who we're talking to today. And I'm just like you. What does that mean for us? I don't recommend that you go dump a bunch of money in advertising your podcast, right? I think that those statistics that I've just shared are for the bigger box brands and maybe some of the national or international brands or the larger companies. What we can do, and you're going to find this as a theme throughout our conversation today, is really focus on the guest experience and building those relationships and then building off the platform for that. So if you're listening and you're thinking, oh boy, here we go about spending money, I'm going to try to keep this as budget friendly as I can. And I don't recommend doing a whole lot with advertising, traditionally anyway. Business leveraging podcasts. Many businesses have incorporated podcasting into their content marketing strategies. According to a study in 2022, about 42% of US businesses were using podcasting for marketing purposes. And then, of course, that number is expected to increase. Engagement and loyalty. This is really what we're going to focus on a lot today. This is one of the most fantastic ways for you to get in front of the people that you want to do business with or that you want to acknowledge and celebrate the good work you're doing together, whether you're a business to consumer business, a B2C or B2B, then this is definitely a great way for you to enhance your relationships with people. So I am already on a second section. We just talked about the popularity. Let's talk about pitfalls. But before we do that, I see that we've got a couple chats and maybe I can ask Caitlin to moderate. Is there something that you might want to mention on behalf of one of our participants and see if we can take some questions?
Hi, Karen. Currently, there are no questions. It was more of an introduction for me to invite anyone to chime in if something comes across.
So good.
I will definitely let you know if there are any questions that come up, though. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you. And so, guys, just so that I can continue to use the screen as my guide for our conversation today, if you do have a question, feel free to throw it in the chat. I'll check in with Caitlin. And then again, at the end, we'll make time and room for questions. And I, again, am also available at any point. So let's talk about the pitfalls. And I put this slide next and this next category because this is real, right? Sometimes when we're thinking that we want to do something new and different in our business in order to enhance either a product or a relationship or market and sales, whatever it is, we kind of have to throw spaghetti at the wall sometimes. And when that happens, we don't always have strategy behind it. And so I found that when I talk to people who have come to us to do business and have us produce their podcast, oftentimes people have tried to do this on their own. And so I've always listened. What were some of the mistakes? What were some of the headaches and the heartaches that you had with podcasting? And I would say that number one thing is a clear lack of purpose. This is really important. I've had a lot of folks over the years, either they've been doing it with us or I've just seen what they're doing out in the business world. And they say they love podcasting and it is a time suck for them. And then when I ask, hey, what is your return on investment? How are things going? Are you growing business? Are you reaching your goals? oftentimes they're scratching their head and they're saying, I don't really know that I have a clear purpose or goal. I just love sharing with anybody who's going to listen. Well, the difficulty is if we don't have a strategy, we don't have a metrics for keeping track of where we're going, then we don't really know if we're ever landing at the place that we're trying to go. So a clear lack of purpose is one of the biggest frustrations, especially when you spend so much time and money on something like this and you don't get what you want. Poor production quality is another consideration. Can you do it from your home office or from your iPhone? Of course you can. People are successful podcasting from all sorts of different equipment. And it doesn't matter where you produce from or what equipment you use. You just want to make sure that the production quality is something that people are going to want to continue to listen to. So you might be dynamic, you might smile, you might have great fun content. And if the production is low quality, they can't hear you, it's grainy, whatever it is, if it's visual or just audio sound quality wise, then you're going to lose them after maybe a couple of minutes for one episode, or you might lose them after a handful of episodes. This is the biggest one, number 3, inconsistent or infrequent publishing schedules. People get busy, right? If we land a great client or a great customer and we know we're busy or we're launching a new product, we get so busy and sometimes podcasting lands on the back burner. That's why working alongside someone like my team or another team who can kind of keep you on a consistent schedule and help do some of those things, it's extraordinarily useful, because once you begin to have those followers and those fans and those people who look forward to seeing what you're sharing on a regular basis, they're going to want to know when to expect that. And if you don't have a plan for that, then you can fall short. I always see people who do podcasting on their own. They'll come back and go, hey, we're launching again. And, we've been gone for 6 months. We disappeared. That's kind of stuff I would keep internally. I would just do it on a consistent basis to make sure that people are right alongside you every step of the way without giving them, ghosting them. So we already talked about how time consuming it can be. If you have the right strategy and you have the right equipment and even some of the right team in place, even if they're just part-time VAs, you can be very successful. This is the most important pitfall. Know after the show glow, especially if your format is where you are interviewing guests and you're involving other people in your podcast. You want to make sure that you have a plan for how to do business with them further, how to get them in front of your customers and clients, or vice versa, how they can get you in front of their clients and customers. So we call it the after show glow here at Phoenix Business RadioX, and that is almost as important as even having a podcast to begin with. Otherwise, why are you doing it if you have no plan for the follow through? I'm going to pause again around pitfalls. Maybe it's not a question. Maybe there's somebody who would just want to share a brief story, or if you've been podcasting yourself, or you've seen somebody else do it. Are there any questions or comments at this point? And we'll see if Caitlin can help us out with that.
Yeah, thank you so much. So we did get a comment with a question. They said, I'm not as interested in starting a podcast as I am in being a good guest. I've recently published a book and have already been on 3 podcasts. How can I keep this positive momentum going?
So good. So hang on to that thought and that question towards the end. We're going to talk about PR and public relations and being a great guest. So today, that's a section of what we're going to focus on. And I hope it maybe in the Q&A, we can really touch on that even more. Today's purpose really is, hey, I want to have my own podcast, or I'm thinking about hosting my own podcast. What do I need to know? What do I need to prepare for? So we'll come back to that. I did slide that in because it's so important. And I'd be happy, as I mentioned earlier, to come back, Anita, wink, wink, if you'll have me back again and we can talk about how being a great guest and how to build that momentum. So we'll come back to that. Thank you for a great question. Anything else, Caitlin, or can we go on?
Yeah, just one more question. They wanted to ask if you could elaborate a little more about the afterglow.
I
The
can.
after show glow.
Yeah, you bet. That's my favorite part. So at least here in the studio, when we are producing a show for one of our clients, let's say Local First Arizona, we want to make sure that when Thomas is finished interviewing folks who have been on his show, that they have enough time to really sit in the conversation. Like, what were the highlights after the audio production is finished and the cameras and the audio is off and the production is on its way to be mastered? We want to make sure that you, as a host of your own show, even if you're doing it yourself, know how to handle the conversation that's going to happen with your, in our case, it's in the studio, but with your guests, What did you love about it? I loved when you said this, and just ruminate around a great conversation. It's almost like going out to dinner or having a cup of coffee with somebody, and you're having a really great conversation. You're connecting, and then before you leave, you shake hands, you give each other a hug, and you're like, you know what, that was super cool. Oftentimes, we kind of highlight what we love so much about our time together. And then the next piece of this is, when are we going to get to see each other again? Right. So thank you for being on my podcast. I'm going to follow up with a time where we can spend 20 minutes together or 15 minutes together. I want to have a chance to tell you a little bit more about my business, or you tell me about yours, or you mentioned a newsletter. I'd love to be in it. I have a great example. Green Living Magazine, Dory Morales was in our studio years ago, and I was hosting that show. And we had been running in the same circles for years, business-wise. And yet she never really kind of recognized who I was. And I thought, well, that was curious. But it wasn't until I hosted a conversation, she was a guest, and she got to talk about green living. And when we were done with that podcast, she said, Karen, I need you to write an article for our magazine. And so I ended up getting to write a magazine article. Most people have to pay for that spot, but it was a gift for me for having her on the show. So those kinds of after the show glow conversations where you can build that relationship going forward is what makes all the difference in the world. So whether it's following up with coffee, sending adding them to the newsletter, those sorts of things, that's with the guest experience. Equally important, your listeners. Making sure that you have the little micro content pieces that are going out afterwards about little snippets from your podcast are very helpful for social media. In addition to asking your audience, asking your viewers, asking your listeners, what did you love most about this conversation? What questions do you have for me or our guests, and that sort of thing. So hopefully that answers your question. And Caitlin, you'll let me know in a bit if I missed something. Are we okay to move on to purpose, or is there something else around the pitfall piece?
There are not any questions more about the pitfalls, so we can proceed. I am notating each of these questions, though,
Thank
and
you.
if they aren't asked at the very end, I'll make sure that we approach them.
I appreciate it. And I can't see the thumbs up, but maybe Anita and Caitlin can. Can you give me a thumbs up if pacing is okay? I tend to talk really fast when I get excited, or if you need me to slow down or what, let me know. Caitlin, how does it look when you can see the thumbs up, or can you see the thumbs up? Maybe I need to put us all on the screen. Here we go. Am I in charge of the screen?
I can see the
good.
thumbs up. Yeah,
Okay,
it
good.
seems like you're going pretty well.
All right.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. So I kind of touched on this a little bit. The purpose, and I will swear by this, and maybe one of you will challenge me, and I'm open to being challenged always. That's how we learn. I believe that the power and the purpose of podcasting ought to be to build relationships, period. That's what we're doing, right? When we say that we're always in sales, we're always selling ourselves, whether we have a business or we're just out in life, we really are creatures that are built to have relationships. And so when we're selling and we use a podcast toward that end, it's an incredible opportunity and the ultimate opportunity to build long-lasting relationships. I just gave a great example of Dory Morales and Green Living Magazine. Again, that's been almost 5 years ago. We've become very good friends and business acquaintances. We refer each other to each other oftentimes for business. And I see that time and time again. Another great example, we have a new financial advisor. He has done 6 podcasts with us. We produce his show. And the third podcast guest that he had is now a $30,000 client for him. And that's the guest. That's not even mentioning those folks who might be listening and eventually will become clients. So use podcasting through that lens, and I think that you will always succeed. You can grow your business through accelerating relationships with the right people, and that's your audience as well as your guests and all of the vendors who support you in your success. I'm going to skip over asking if there's any questions about that piece right now, and I want to talk about positioning. There are a lot of different types and styles of podcasting. We produce a whole bunch of different types of formats for folks. Some people kind of mix it up, but let me give you an example of some of the ideas that we feel are great. Interview-based podcast. You'll hear me say that really is one of the best ways to do it. Case study podcasts. Those are great, right? So if you came on and you've had a great experience with launching a product, or you have a client who's had great success in working with you, invite those folks on and treat it as a case study and just walk your listeners and viewers through the success. What was the problem? How was it resolved? What's so great about working with you? And the built-in testimonials there. Industry insight podcasts are very popular. Panel discussion are very popular. Arizona Technology Council is one of our clients, and Steve Zalstra and I, the president and CEO, host that one together. We've been doing about for 4 years, and every time it's a panel discussion, and we just kind of lob questions at our guests, and they answer them from that expert and that industry perspective. Also popular are productivity and efficiency podcasts. Even if you're not in that field, that's a great way to help people get to feel for how you can help them with some sort of hack, right? What do you do in your industry that can make their life easier? Sales and marketing podcasts, entrepreneurial stories are incredible. That's, of course, what we do with the Arizona Good Business podcast here, and most of the Phoenix Business RadioX shows that I host are entrepreneurial in nature. Technology and innovation podcasts are also widely popular as well. Here's the one thing that I'll say. I often about somebody wanting to start a podcast and having it just be their voice or a video of them all the time. I would shy away from that. Oftentimes, when you're sharing and you're calling it a podcast, and it's always you speaking, you tend to just keep with the same group of people who are already following and listening to you, right? So I would recommend, if you're going to want to share thought leadership, that you do that through 2 to 3 minute videos or 2 to 3 minute audio clips, and not call it a podcast. A podcast really is this great exchange for relationship building, and save this thought leadership for, as one of our folks had asked earlier about promoting a book or sharing your wisdom. Be a guest when you really want it to be about you. But the most successful folks who are hosts in podcasts are shining the spotlight on other people and kind of putting that wreath on their door so other people can share their stories when they're with them. This is a really important section of our conversation today. So I am going to pause and check in with Caitlin and see if we might have any questions about either positioning and how to utilize the guest experience to your advantage, or anything we've talked about previously. How are we doing, Caitlin?
Yeah, thank you so much. So we do have a question here of if you're not ready to commit to consistently starting your own podcast, what strategy is best for landing as a guest on quality existing podcasts?
I can tell we're going to need to have how to be the best guest. Best practices in being a guest, Anita. So make sure that we book another opportunity for that. So if you're not ready to have your own podcast and host on a regular basis, I want to make sure I heard the question, because my mind went about 3 different directions. Caitlin, the question specifically again.
Yes. So the question is, what strategy is best for landing as a guest on a really good podcast?
So good. So be clear about what your speaking points are. And then there are on LinkedIn, as well as Facebook, if you're on Facebook or any of the social media platforms, there are a lot of different groups that are geared towards podcast guests. I don't have any of them in mind because people tend to come to us, and I don't typically do that. But I know many people, my clients included, will get in these groups and just continue to interact with people, look for which podcasts make the most sense for you to be on, and then be sure to share about what you have to offer. Why would listeners and viewers benefit from listening to you? So again, it really goes back to purpose. Be really clear about why you might be a great guest. The other thing I think that's really important to be invited back and have recurring invitations is to become a great storyteller. Think of anywhere from 5 to 7 little stories or anecdotes, even sharing statistics, kind of fitness category. Have some stories that you've practiced and you rehearsed, so that when the time comes and you are a guest on a show, you can easily share those examples. Most people like to learn from examples where they can visualize and picture something. So that is another strategy I would encourage you to keep in mind, not only to be a great guest, but also to put yourself out there. A lot of folks do hire PR companies. I would highly recommend considering that. especially if you have a book that you've published. You can also write press releases that are geared towards being a guest on podcast shows. An easy Google search in your industry or the industry that you're wanting to break into or you're wanting to find time with. You can easily Google podcasts with those names. You can even get very specific. Podcast in Arizona, if that's important to you to stay local, and then just reach out via email, maybe share a brief little video of yourself that introduces you. And again, highlight the benefits and the reason why those listeners and that host would benefit from having you on their podcast. It's all about them, right? And less about you and I. All right, Caitlin, what else?
Thank you, Karen. We have another question here. They would like to know what the best practices are for the duration and spacing of episodes.
Oh gosh, that's such a great question. So best practices for duration. I'll tell you what we do. We have studio time for our clients for up to an hour, and I'll share why I do that. I believe that if we're building relationships, it's important to move beyond sound bites and just those quick few sentences and really sit in the story and the conversation with someone. So again, I always give the example. It's as if you're out for a cup of coffee or a meal with somebody and you're just getting to know each other, right? You maybe met at a networking event, or maybe it was a cold call and you get together one-on-one. And that's when we really get to know each other. If you're only doing that for 10 to 15 minutes, like speed dating or speed networking, you don't really get to know anybody deep enough to know whether you want to do business with them going forward. So I would recommend, if it's an interview style in any of those examples I gave that involve other guests on your podcast, I would say anywhere from 45 minutes up to an hour. Not everybody does that. Some people stick with 20 to 30 minutes. If that's the case, and they're just a little shorter introductions, and that's fine too. We really recommend going a little bit deeper. If you're going to be the influencer and it's a podcast where you are sharing thought leadership and tips and tricks, I would keep it again anywhere, 15 minutes or less. And I really do recommend chunking those down into 3 minutes, little sound bites or micro pieces, and not necessarily calling them podcasting. Frequency. A lot of our folks, again, just for frame of reference, come and do it once a month with us. We know that you're extraordinarily busy business owners. And so if you're doing this on your own or with another, podcast production team or ours, I would recommend at least once a month. That would be the least amount of time I would recommend it. Some folks do it twice a month and some do it weekly. I think there's even some people who do it more than that. The one thing I will say is a lot of folks will pre-record ahead of time. And I think that's all well and fine, especially if it's just you, the one who's speaking. You can certainly bulk load those and prepare them ahead of time and then just distribute them over time. I will caution you, if you involve guests and you're getting them front loaded well ahead of time, I would recommend having no more than 2 to 3 weeks before that podcast is pushed out and published. And here's why. Your guest has left the experience with you, hopefully excited, really enjoying, sharing their story and their interest and their experience and their wisdom. And if you say to them at the end of that, okay, now it's going to be, 2 months, 3 months. I even was a guest on a podcast not too long ago, and it was 6 months, 6 months before that particular podcast was published and pushed out. And I don't typically do this, but we're talking about so many deep things in that conversation as a guest. I actually said, hey, where is this podcast? I haven't seen it. I haven't noticed it. Oh, it's going to be another couple months. I'm like, could I re-listen to it? Because I'm not even sure that what I'm speaking about is still relevant to what's going on in the industry and what's relevant for me professionally. And when I did listen to it, it was fine, but I was really thinking, gosh, that's a long time to sit on the shelf. We want to catch those people when they're excited about having left that conversation with you. And so making sure that you are consistent, I would say at least once a month, anywhere from 15 minutes to an hour, I think is reasonable when it's an interview style. And making sure that if you've had a guest, that you get it pushed out within at least a couple weeks, if not sooner. Caitlin, what else?
Oh, that was perfect. There's no additional questions at the moment. Thank you.
Ooh, shoo. That's good. All right. Let's go on to the next little section then. production. And this could, again, be this itself could be a whole nother conversation, or that could be a webinar in itself. I just kind of wanted to pick out a couple of things that I notice when I'm listening to podcasts or I'm watching video podcasts that are important. A quiet environment is key. It seems kind of silly to even mention that, but sometimes folks, when they're doing podcasting from their car, or in a busy co-work space or in a busy office, while they might be very focused and attentive, if there's a lot of distraction going on or a lot of noise interference, it makes it very hard for the viewers and listeners to enjoy or really even engage in and learn from the conversation. Let's talk a little bit about investment. And I'm happy, Anita, if you will send afterwards, I've got pages and pages of information that's a little bit of a deeper dive around production investment specifically and what kind of equipment. Thanks for the thumbs up. And I know we can all see lovely Anita in the corner. I'm so sorry, Anita, that I've got you highlighted there. If that were me, I'd be like, you got to move that. So production equipment wise, listen, this is an investment. Whether you're using a production team or you're doing it yourself, you're going to need some equipment, a good set of headphones, a quality microphone, if it's video, lights, and a decent camera. I've got soundboards. We're going to talk about apps and the platforms and that sort of thing in just a minute. But to give you an idea, production investment wise, there are 2 free podcasting platforms that I think are open source and they're really great. One is Audacity, 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 and it's free editing software, which is widely used, very popular by podcasts, and it just provides the basic features. I am not really great when it comes to technology. Thank goodness I have a team, but even I can handle Audacity, and that is a free audio editing software and open source. Anchor is another free application, and this is a hosting platform that you can use not only to host, but also to distribute. And it's, again, a fairly easy to use tool for recording and then doing what edits you need, even if you want to keep it basic, either from your computer or your phone. I would recommend for microphones that you use a Blue Yeti. It's not what we use here, but if I were doing it by myself, that's what I would use. I think they're about $150, $160 right now, $160. And they are one of the most popular USB microphones that have great quality for the price. And it's just a plug and play option, and it's easy for beginners to use and to start recording. This is really important. A pop filter and a boom arm bundle. It ranges around $20 to $30 to help improve the quality of your sound. A pop filter and boom arm can be used to help you with your setup. And these are fairly inexpensive accessories to allow you to position your microphone more conveniently and then take care of any of the pop, the P's and the S's and the B's that sometimes we pop when we're talking. Libsyn starts up, I think it's $7 a month right now. Libsyn is a liberated syndication. It's a podcast hosting service that offers affordable plans per month, and it's reliable. That's key. Sometimes when we're looking for some of these hosting services, make sure you check the testimonials and the recommendations and how long they've been in business. And if you're signing an agreement, a contract, for how long, all those important things we have to do with our due diligence. This is a great, Libsyn is great for analytics as well. So you can kind of keep track of who's listening. And then you also have the ability to distribute. So again, here at Phoenix Business RadioX, we broadcast live here from our studio, and then we send it out for our clients too. Apple, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Spreaker, and all those things. And Libsyn can do that for you as well. That's kind of a biggie on platforms and equipment. So we'll come back to questions as soon as I finish this slide. Oh, hey, great spelling. I was a 3rd grade teacher. Did anybody catch my spelling? My spelling error. Maintain consistent, it should say, levels. This is really important. Test, test, test. Practice, practice, practice. Make sure that you have the consistent audio levels. And when we're here in the studio live, it's easy because I can control all the microphones. When we do our remote broadcast, we have people from out of the country or just even out of the greater Phoenix area. I don't always get to have the same quality control because they're coming in on their phones or they're coming in on their computers. So if you're going to be doing remote podcasting with your guests, make sure that you have maybe 10 to 15 minutes ahead of time to just have them work with their sound and their audio on their end, because you likely won't be able to control a lot of it on your end. We already talked about the pop filter, which is the P's, the B's, and the S's to try to control some of that. Let me see if we want to ask for more questions. Yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit further. I think I'll do that before Caitlin and I come back and ask you if there are some more questions or comments and thoughts to share. Let's talk a little bit more about some of the software and the equipment. Well, we already talked about equipment, but software and applications that you're going to need to have. Recording software. I already mentioned Audacity. There's also GarageBand, which is with Macs and Apple computers. The microphone, we talked about how clear and important that is. There's also a Audio Technica, and I'll share all this with Anita to get it out to you, which is an ATR 2100, is a second most popular choice next to that Blue Yeti. Headphones, I really feel like this is important. I often don't see people podcasting with the headsets. I think it's important to be able to get rid of all the distractions for us, right? So we could podcast without a headset, but there's something to be said around having that hyper-focused attention with all the distractions we have in our world, especially with technology and learning to multitask and type with our toes and do all the other things that we do. I think a headset really helps, and it just shows that you are professional and you've got the equipment. Headsets are super easy to purchase and relatively inexpensive. Editing software, again, I mentioned Audacity already. Adobe Audition is another great resource for you. It does the recording, the editing, as well as mixing audio if you want to involve some music for the intro and outro or any of the commercials that you're going to do as well. For hosting platforms, I already mentioned Libsyn. There's also Podbean, and we also talked about Anchor. Website and blogging. This is really important. Where am I going to put this podcast, right? When I put it out there, again, whether it's these thought leadership 3 to 5 minute little snippets, or if you're going to do a full-on podcast, you want to have a website or a blog. The WordPress, Squarespace, or Wix are fairly user-friendly for you to use. And if you already have an existing website for your business, we recommend that you just create a drop-down box that either says media or podcasting. And that way, if you've been a guest, you can have those there, highlight them, and then your ongoing podcast, if you're hosting your own, can be included there as well. So either a separate website and blog just designated for your website and whatever name you gave it, excuse me, not your website, your podcast, and whatever name you give it, or a drop-down box. Remote recording. Back in the day when I opened the studio almost 7 years ago, we did everything on Skype. I don't even know if anybody uses Skype anymore. And then it was Zoom, right? Zoom during COVID was all the rage. Now Riverside.fm is very popular. We use StreamYard. And when we broadcast live into LinkedIn and YouTube. I cannot understate how great YouTube is for folks, again, if you're going to do the video piece of this. And that naturally, each of those platforms naturally have fairly high quality. They do a lot of sound adjusting, even when you can't control somebody's audio when they're coming in. MP3 tagging allows you to metadata your audio files, like the episode title, artist, and cover art. Having those ID3 tag editors are really important. This is all kind of that back-end stuff that sometimes when we talk about hosting our own podcast, we think it's just the performance and how we're showing up and who are we inviting on as a guest and what are we talking about. But it's all these other things, the RSS feed, even the tags, in addition to some of the keywords and that sort of stuff that happens behind the scenes. In this big crowded world of everybody's podcasting, you want to make sure that you're getting in front of your audience and looking the best that you can. Graphics and promotion. I don't know about you, but I have fallen in love with Canva. That's what my team uses. There's also Adobe Spark. And again, I'm just thinking from a perspective of you as a busy business owner and perhaps a small to a medium-sized team, whether you're doing this yourself or you've got a teammate who's going to do it for you, you want to keep it inexpensive and you want it to be fairly easy to do. So Canva and Adobe Spark for those eye-catching podcast cover art pieces. Social media platforms, LinkedIn, of course, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. You'll have to look up and see the different dimensions and sizes for the videos if you're going to do podcasting as a video, in addition to even just the cover art when you're promoting it. And be careful too. A lot of times now these social media platforms, Instagram, of course, even I think LinkedIn is this way now. They're not big fans of the links going out to other websites, right? They want to keep you on their platform as long as they can. So if you're going to be doing a little micro content piece, maybe a little 15-second teaser about a longer podcast you did, you want to make sure that you capture that in a neat post, either a still photo with just a picture of an audio wave to have it represent that you've done a podcast. That's really important so that people go, oh, well, that's interesting. It caught their attention for 7 seconds, and then they can go and listen to more when you've got their attention. Analytics are important. I would also recommend PodTrack and Chartable for the analytics. Like I mentioned, for some of these other platforms, always check each of these software or these apps. Oftentimes they have analytics built into them. But if you're wanting to get real strategic about who's listening, where they're coming from, how long, what part of the world, that sort of thing, what device are they listening on, PodTrack and Chartable are great for that. Transcription services. This is huge. AI kind of gets a bad rap, especially when we're wanting to make sure we keep people in jobs. And at the same time, if you can utilize AI to do things faster and quicker and give you a head start, you are ahead of the pack. And so when it comes to transcription services, there's Rev or Otter.ai. And I would recommend that you create a transcript for your episodes so that you can improve accessibility as well as the SEO. And then we're going to talk in a little bit more about promoting podcasts, whether you've been a guest or a host, and how important those transcripts can be so that you can really create this evergreen material and have it have a wide reach. As far as monetization goes, we do things a little bit different here at the studio. So I'm not going to speak to that because our clients host and sponsor their own shows. They're not looking for sponsors, but can people make money with podcasting? Of course they can. It's part of why it's so widely popular. Patreon, advertisers, sponsorships, depending on what your goal is, you might want to explore ways to do that. And I'm happy to have a conversation with you offline about what that looks like, and what's in it for whatever company is sponsoring you. That's going to be the most important thing. If you want to find a sponsor, you better make sure that they are getting what they want out of it, and be really clear about how you can deliver that. So that is a mouthful. I'm going to pause again and ask Caitlin if we have questions, comments, stories coming from our crew.
Karen, thank you so much. Now, you mentioned a lot of different applications and software here. You had mentioned earlier that you were going to share these resources with Anita afterwards. So are the hosting platforms that you had mentioned and the softwares that you had mentioned, will those be in that thing that you're sharing with Anita afterwards?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Okay, perfect. Because we do have a couple of questions in the chat of what the hosting platforms were named, and they also had questions about like the free software that you had mentioned. So if we know that, we can be able to follow up afterwards with a list. That way they can look into it. That'll be great. A couple of comments in the chat. Martha had said that they've used Audacity before they go live or before a recording session. It's their favorite go-to for rehearsing and checking sound levels. And then we did have a question of like, is a headset necessary for when you're having podcasts?
Love the comment, and I love people are sharing their resources and ideas. Thank you for that. Again, I can't see it, so I'm glad you're all taking care of each other and yourselves. Is a headset necessary? It is not necessary. Aesthetically, and maybe you'd feel differently because I don't know if everybody else has a headset on, but I think it gives this really professional, sharp look to what we're doing. Does it mess up your hair? Yes, a little bit. But what it does for me personally, and I tend to be a little scattered in my thinking, and really have to hyper focus. So for me, especially, having a headset on really helps me to focus on what I'm doing. And I think there's great appeal. One of the neatest things that I love about when we've had over 3,000 guests come up through our studio over the last 6 years, when I look on LinkedIn or I see on Instagram somebody who's only been a guest on one of our shows one time, and their profile picture is of them in front of a microphone with a headset on. And I can tell it's our studio, right? Either because of our step and repeat, or just I know I recognize them. There's something that says people want to listen to me when I have a headset on, or people want to listen to me when I have a microphone in front of me. There's something about that, right? Why do we, I was going to say, why do we trust media? And then I kind of laughed when I got ready to say that. We want to listen to people who hold authority. And so if you're doing a professional photo shoot, what do? They have you, either opening a book or, looking off into the distance, or standing in front of a microphone, or standing in front of a group of people, or busily working on the thing that you're creating if you've got a product. I think it's really a great aesthetic if you have a headset on. And for me, it helps me focus. So I'm hopeful that will help you. And I notice we have our guests wear the headsets in the studio as well, because I want them to drown out anything else that might be popping into our mind. And it really helps us to do that way. Was there another question, Caitlin, or was that it?
That was a great explanation. Another comment from one of our listeners was that they really like StreamYard when you were mentioning different tools that they can be able to use. Another comment was that Shure SHURE headsets are great and well priced as well. So definitely a lot of love and resource sharing inside the chat right now.
I love that. Good. And I would love to, I hadn't thought about this till just now, and maybe Anita can help us do that. But I would love to, since I can't see everybody, I would love everybody to invite you to Mac 6, which is in Tempe. That's where our studio is. The Local First team has their kind of remote site just outside my studio. So if people would want to be invited to come do like a little coffee or something, we can have more of a conversation. That's a follow-on to this for those of us who have either been here in person today, live, or listened to it later. So Anita, again, hopefully maybe you can help me coordinate that, and that way I can get to know people a little bit better than just staring at the screen like you are. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and finish up the last couple of slides, because we are at 12:50, and I'm always all around trying to end on time and start on time. And I want to make sure we build in some Q&A that perhaps people can actually, we'll get rid of my screen share and actually get to see you. So let's talk about promotion. And I think for our participant who was talking about, wanting to be a best guest, best practices as a guest, and opportunities to be invited more frequently for additional podcasts. This is really important for all of us, whether you're hosting your own podcast or you want to be a guest. You want to make sure that you have a strategy in mind. This is all about content generation. This is all about selling yourself. This is all about, below all of that as a foundation, building relationships. I talked about that several times throughout my presentation today. When we are a host, when we're a guest, when we're at a networking event, we are always wanting to share that best side of ourselves so that people can get to know, is this somebody that I'd really want to do business with, right? And so when you have an experience as a guest, or you're hosting your own and you've got lots of episodes coming in, there's so many things that you can do with the content. Social media, we've already highlighted that. Again, sharing just little snippets, or I learned something from this guest, or whatever those little things are. I would always encourage you to push your podcasts out to social media. Newsletters. This is underutilized. I'm not a big fan of receiving newsletters, and it's taken me 6 years to even let my team have a newsletter on behalf of Phoenix Business RadioX, because I just, again, don't want to be one of many that's just doing it to do it. However, the cool thing about newsletters, when you're having a podcast on a regular basis, is that your articles or your news little snippets in your newsletter can be about other people. A happy customer, a content client, a cool connection that happened between two guests, whatever it is. Make it about your community, make it about the products and the services that you share from the lens of people from the outside. And that's where podcasting gives you that great vantage point. LinkedIn articles are often underutilized. I would encourage you to, again, when it comes down to transcribing your podcast, you can have, again, feed it into AI if you need to, but you can have it reworked, repurposed so that the podcast that was once an audio experience or maybe in a video visual experience can now be a written article or more than one, depending on how much content is covered. One of my favorite things in working with business owners here at Business RadioX is that these folks, the way we've taught them, these hosts, how to host their own podcast, again, it's in building those rich relationships. So if you're not an author yet, but you maybe have aspired to be one, you could start with your first book being something that's a compilation of a lot of things learned from the guests on your podcast. And if you're having it transcribed and you've got that content, you can easily formulate a book very quickly that has you as the author and also features maybe 12 to 15, 30, 45 guests that you've had on. And now you've got a book that not only those folks are going to want to share, but also the people who care most about them are going to want to listen and share because they've been a part of it. And in that way, you are introduced to all of those networks. The last little bullet I have here is guests. I can't reiterate enough how important it is to really consider having guests on and being very strategic about why you're finding those guests. I've got a great example. Let's say you're B2C. And I'll give the example of a business owner who owns an automotive shop. Typical small mom and pop auto shops are just, a business to consumer. I bring my car, I need oil change, tell me what's wrong with my car. However, a B2B approach to that auto shop would be fantastic. And so somebody who owns an auto shop might consider having a local podcast that really highlights the people in their town or in their area, right? And we're talking about local first. And think about it strategically as we kind of give this example. This is what we help our clients do. How do we go about this to get the right people in the room? If I owned an auto shop, then I would be inviting in the small business that has 3 trucks on the road because they're roofers, or the landscaper who has 6 trucks, or the pool company that has 15 trucks. And I would have those business owners come in, and I might show, I live in Ahwatukee, it might be, Ahwatukee business on the road, or, Ahwatukee businesses we love, or something silly like that. And the sponsor of the show would be this mechanic shop. And I might be the mechanic who I may or may not be very comfortable talking in front of people, but I can be a great listener. And I can invite on these local business owners, maybe from my BNI group or my Chamber of Commerce or Local First Arizona, and have them talk about their businesses and share, so that when we're in the after show glow, to go back to that comment, they've loved being on the podcast. They appreciate now they've got the content they can put on their website, their social media. I'm going to do the same. And now they're likely going to say, I'd like to bring my car or truck to you. Or I've got a longtime mechanic that I'm not going to leave. It's my wife's brother and I can't leave him. However, my kid plays baseball and I love this experience so much and getting to know you. I'm going to make sure that my kid brings your cards to the baseball team. So that kind of thing, right? It's always about building those relationships. Kind of a silly example, but I think it's a great one to see really how far reaching the idea around podcasting and relationships in particular can grow for you. All right. I am going to stop on this one because I want to make sure that we do have time for some either, general questions or questions that have been percolating while I've been going on. Performance is another whole conversation. And again, I hope maybe Anita will, and the team will think about having us back, or if we get together over coffee in person, we can talk a little bit more about how to position yourself. It takes some practice, but we would want to make sure that you know what your personal brand is, what your style is, where scripts are helpful, where they're not, as well as voice strategy. And again, attentive listening is really a big deal. As you've noticed, I've talked about that through the whole time, though I haven't really been in listening since I've been hosting this. Public relations and press. Again, this is all about building relationships. An easy Google search for why a press release or how press releases are important these days would be helpful for you. And again, go back to LinkedIn. and Facebook for those groups, and just search podcast groups and find the ones that are going to help you promote yourself as a coveted guest. Make sure that you're thinking it through the lens. What do they want from me? Not what can I deliver for them? So I'm going to be quiet for a moment or two, and I'm going to stop sharing so I can see everybody's smiling faces. And Caitlin, how do we want to do this? I know we only have a few minutes left. So yeah. Any burning questions that people just have got to get in there?
Yeah, I think if anyone wanted to chime in that they haven't typed so far, I do believe that we did cover the questions that were in the chat as you were going along. This was absolutely amazing as well, just super helpful.
I'm glad to hear it. And I tend to talk fast. So again, I apologize if you're like, gulping on the wind that I'm creating for you. I am always looking to build more connections. I started this company again about 7 years ago because what I really do is I'm an executive leadership coach and a coach for business owners around mind, body, and spirit wellness. And I needed a wreath on my door to be able to work with people to help them play at the highest level. And that's really why I opened Phoenix Business RadioX, because I wanted people to get to know me in the Metro Phoenix area. And it has miraculously worked in incredible ways, well beyond my dreams. So Anita, I'm going to check in with you. I know I kind of put you on the spot a couple of times. I'd love to talk afterwards, if we could, about maybe seeing if people want, and I can even send it and you let me take it from there. But an opportunity to come together for coffee here at Max 6, and then an offer to answer some questions and other formats. And I know you have your learning lab. We can do around, best practices for being a host, best practices for finding the best gigs and that sort of thing. And if you'll put in the chat before you bug off of here, what other topics you might find that I could be helpful with, and maybe we can come back and do it either for short snippets in the learning lab or another opportunity like this. On that note, I am really grateful to have your time and attention today. And I hope that I do see you in the wonderful world of podcasting going forward. I'll let either Caitlin or Anita close us out.
I would like to thank everyone for participating. And of course, I would be coordinating with Karen a coffee and podcasting at Max 6. I think it would be an awesome opportunity. Feel free to reach out to me at anita@localfirstaz.com. And I don't know, Karen, are you providing any information or the PowerPoint that you presented today?
I will. I'll put the PowerPoint and I'll send it to you if that's okay. And then all the notes. And I'm telling you, I've got a bunch of notes. So I'll make sure that everything that I used and gathered is in somewhat of an assembled order. And then the PowerPoint as well. And then, of course, my contact information I'll share as well.
Okay, and I will be certain to forward the information to everyone. And again, I thank you very much for your participation.
Real quick, Anita, I see that people are asking. I think we have recorded this. You'll be sharing that or no?
Yes, actually, this podcast workshop would be uploaded to our learning lab. And just so everyone will know that, at Local First, we are building our local learning lab for the entrepreneurial support team. So this will serve as a resource for you to be able to, learn more about, just some areas, some pain points, or just some new ideas that can help amplify your business. So just know that I will send out the PowerPoint, and I would also be in touch as we update the information to the local learning lab as well.
Yay. All right, gang. Have a great rest of your day. Caitlin, thanks for being a great moderator. And Anita, thank you again for the invitation and helping to create a great conversation today.
Thank you so much.